Hello to all the one who gathers here and to those who listen, share, or simply take a moment to reflect in this episode of what we will be experiencing today together. So in this occasion, we will continue with the Ra University, which in some ways allow us to expand our current experience. I always remember that this is a space in where each of us are just listening, just seeing something, and where the one who is speaking is simply sharing a point of view, an opinion, nothing else. And you have the free will to decide what to take or where to leave. Okay? So with that said, I welcome our guest, Ed, to start the second module of the Ra University.
Hello, welcome to Ra University. This is module 2. This one is called Cristalising Consciousness. And hopefully I'm kind of going to give you a background on what the current state of neuroscience and consciousness research shows unbelievable parallels and links to what Ra says in the Ra material and the Confederation teachings. So hopefully this will be helpful for everybody. And something that we can all learn from on our path towards adepthood. I hope that you'll all kind of resonate with the information that I give. Obviously, like Quo always says, this is my opinion. This is, if it doesn't resonate, feel free to drop it. And obviously, these are scientific inquiries. And the whole point of science is that it's a continual process of discovery. You know, if something doesn't work, even if we really believed it, it has to kind of go in the bin when you get a new paradigm, as it were. So I hope that you can see how these paradigms are slowly shifting towards what we know and love about the Ra material and the metaphysics behind the illusion and physics that we see ourselves in reality. So first off, back to what we were saying last module about how that everything in reality is the one, is the creator. There's no separation from anything. It's just we perceive separation because of the way it's structured. So that's why the veil's there, so that the experience can happen. Now, in these conditions, we need a way of experiencing. We need a way of doing things. And that is essentially what consciousness is. It's the overwhelming understanding of this information, the processing of it, the bringing in things and then experiencing them. And that's essentially what we perceive as consciousness. So I'm going to try and go into the details of how this works inside us and, how the physics of last week and of the illusion all can come together inside you and your consciousness to show the creator the creation. So the first thing that I hope I got across last time was that the very foundation of reality as we know it is consciousness. All is mind. So this is really our kind of mind part. What is our mind? How does this help us? How does that then also link to the biology, to the body? How does the mind, body, spirit complex complete the circuits so that we can see this interdimensional viewpoint that we are allowed to see a little chunk of in third, but we're going to see a lot more of in fourth. So, so the real things we need to understand is that, like Ra says, matter itself, from the very baseline, all comes from awareness. Every single step of the densities, every single step of the growth and the progression, the evolution of consciousness is these small steps in awareness, of being able to see that a little bit further, to be able to understand that a little bit more. Now, in physics, as we were speaking about last week, a large chunk of the kind of current theories at the minute talk more about, instead of energy moving around, they talk more about points of information. They talk about the transfer of information between points is really the fundamental part. So they're kind of seeing this whole kind of all is mind, right? They're just seeing it as information rather than energy, ones and zeros, as you could see. But for us Law of One people, that ones and zeros, those are choices. Those are the choices that consciousness is making at every single level. So this leads us to this, once again, this panpsychism, this idea that every single thing in the universe is conscious, which I hope to show you some examples of that, I found kind of mind-blowing when I put them in that context. And something that the modern day version of panpsychism is called idealism, which basically suggests that there's no separation and that consciousness is everything, but it kind of removes the need for there to be a creator. So I'm not really a big fan of it, but it's more of a logical, atheistic way of defining the exact same thing. So as Madame Blavatsky said, most atheists are actually scientific pantheists. They just don't know it. So all of this, once again, I'm going to try to tie back to Ra all the time. Now, at the bottom, I put little Ra quotes. I'm not convinced in all of them. I just kind of got the AI to grab ones that made a point. But, some of them work, some of them don't. So I probably won't be reading them out. But if you go into the material with what I've said, like I said last time, I've got a big kind of list of AI quotes curated that can show it. So if you go into the material thinking about what Ra says in this way, it's like many of the other things. He talks about things without talking about it without giving it a name. So you can then apply it to much wider things. But when you start applying it to consciousness, applying it to these things I'm going to be talking about, it's unbelievable, the parallels. So what Ra says is that every single thing in creation, it all came from this one original thought. It all came from this primal understanding that the creator wanted to understand and experience itself. Now, the way that happens is through vibration. When you think about the first thing that happened, the Big Bang, and we were talking about last week, that free will is essentially these waves moving through in a chaotic fashion, doing every single thing into infinity. That then restricted by these other forces like love and being made through light to experience. So every single part of the whole of what we're talking about, from the very beginning of the universe to the very end, is all just the progression of that one original thought. So we ourselves are a way of the creator understanding itself. We are the product of that one original thought. Now, when you start looking into the physics, once again, you've got the idea that cosmology talks about that the entire universe is based on this awareness or this perception, setting it into a real position. And if you're looking at it from a panpsychist point of view, every point in matter is a point of awareness. That is what keeps everything in creation, everything in reality. So this idea that there's been one energetic system, one original thought, one song, one vibration that has gone through all of creation has been spoken about forever. The alchemists, they used to call it the prima materia, like it's been called by philosophers the first principle. This idea of something coming from nothing that then goes on to be everything. So, it's fundamental to us understanding what we are and why the real reasons, the philosophy of why the law of one is what it is and why it works so well, in my opinion. The first step of what Ra describes is the densities, right? Now, if you think about the densities, they are steps in consciousness. They're steps in awareness. Every step you go up the ladder, you combine more and more information to give you a broader view, a broader awareness and understanding of the creation. From an atom, or arguably from the ethers and the elemental forces that come together to create those vibrational nexus that we call atoms. Those are just the stable, like nexus of awareness that keeps perpetuating itself in a very specific system. When you look at how atoms form, if you go across the periodic table, they form like one proton at a time, one electron at a time, building up slowly more and more and more and more complex nexuses, right? With slightly wider, slightly different structures and gravities. But the actual forces that make them, like we spoke about last week with the pendulum swings of Walter Russell, or the reciprocal action of motion through ether of Dewey B. Lawson. All of these things kind of add up to this idea that the atoms themselves are just these vibrational points of awareness inside the huge field of consciousness which the universe manifests into. So, starting at the very smallest unit, you have to talk about this thing called the quanta of intelligence, or a quanta of consciousness, as I prefer to talk about it. So, if you talk about quantum physics, all a quanta is one very, very tiny discrete packet. So, a quanta of light is a photon, right? So, when you're talking about these terms of consciousness, just to give it an understandable field, think of this quanta of intelligence being each point of awareness in that huge etheric quantum field comes together into what we understand to be everything. So when you look at the science of the minute, the way that we actually kind of viewing atoms is changing all the time, and the way that it links it to awareness with things like the quantum, with the double slit experiments, all of these different ways that our consciousness seems to be linked fundamentally with matter, and how the resonance of different atoms and the vibrations that they cause give them very specific kind of traits, as it were. That's how you get the columns on the periodic table. The amount of electrons in the electron shell give that atom its structure and its energy. The same way that us as humans, we all have different layers, different strengths, different skills that make us our crystalline entity. So Ra describes this as basically every single thing that we know of is the infinite intelligence being grafted into the infinite energy and creating a vibrational unit of awareness. So, scaling that up, every single thing in the universe can be seen as that information, those packets of information, those quantas of intelligence being moved between entities. And the entity is just a point of awareness that then collapses the universe into a state where it exists. This just to give you a bit of an understanding about atoms. And like I said, the fact that these are entities. So over here on the left, you have the hydrogen waveform pattern. Now, this is the best way of understanding how electron shells look. So this is basically just how the electron patterns at different electron shells display themselves. So it will be basically anywhere inside that field, you can find an electron. And the more times you look at it, there will always be in those discrete places. So this, if you look at it, is incredible, because to me, that is a map of sacred geometry. There's a map of sacred geometry done at the subatomic level, or at the atomic level, as it is. So moving over from that, if you think about each one of these electron shells being a unit of intelligence, or a quanta that atom, that entity, has to use as choice. It can decide what it does with those energies, how it can move, and what it can bond to, what it can hybridize to connect and form bigger and bigger and more complex structures, kind of like social memory complexes for atoms. So over here on the top on the right, you've got one of the first pictures ever of actual atoms. Now that picture there, that is, I can't remember what chemical it is, but those are the actual bonds and electron shell hybridization of actual chemical, right? It's unbelievably high resolution. So as you can see, it's like you get the individual points of the atoms, but you also get this field that combines all of them. So it looks like a kinematics pattern. Once again, that there is perfect sacred geometry at the atomic scale. Now, as you look underneath it, you can see how all of those different electron pairs, all the different bonding, actually gives you structure. So, like these hybridized molecules. So when two atoms bond, essentially the way I see it is they're making choice to do that. They are deciding to share those electrons, because everything is awareness, everything is choice, everything is free will. So when that atom chooses to join that molecule, it bonds its electron shells with the others, like its aura bonds to the other molecule atoms inside the molecule, and all of their auras combine to give you that pattern that you see there, like a climatic vibrational pattern that comes out from the molecule itself. So if the table underneath shows how is you keep doing that in 3D, you get three-dimensional sacred geometric patterns. Each one of these will come out to a Platonic solid, giving you exactly what Plato and Socrates said, and Pythagoras said, in ancient Greece, that the entire world, the entire universe, is made out of Pythagorean Platonic solids, and that's why. This is exactly why. And it's like I said last week, all sacred geometry comes down to circles interacting inside a circle. But to quote Richard Feynman, all atoms jiggle. They don't stay still. They are literally units of vibrating energy. So because of that vibration, where does that vibration go? Now, we spoke last time about how the ethers are the fundamental part of reality, and that there's different types, right? There's a spiritual part, there's the elemental parts, but there's also the Akashic part. Now, my personal theory, this is not one that I'm going to be able to scientifically prove, but I'm going to continue to try to show it, is that when points in space-time, in reality vibrate, they pass that vibration into the Akashic etheric matter, where it is restored, where it's crystallized for eternity. That's what we call the past. Yeah, that record of everything that did happen. Not that could, that's the future, but that did. Where every single time point, those atoms, those matter did exist at. All of that's recorded. And that's what the Akashic record is, essentially. But the thing that's recorded is this vibration, is the actual action of each of these atoms interacting with one of those and vibrating and putting out energy at that subatomic level. And how every part of consciousness is just scaling it up from that point. Once you start to get the choices that these atoms make to then combine together to make molecules, molecules on their own are incredible. You are only made of interacting molecules. But we'll get there eventually. First off, let's just talk about crystals. Now, for me, crystals are some of the most incredible, products of just molecules. Now, that picture on the right is a picture of a quartz molecule at the atomic level. Now, don't you think it is crazy that quartz, which is the stone that they used to carve the runes onto in ancient Viking times, is a 6-pointed star with a few little bits coming out the sides? It's a bit strange, considering that all of the runes fit into a 6-pointed star. How did they know that the letter they were carving would fit onto the exact atomic structure of the... Anyway, I digress. That there is the atomic structure of quartz. Now, if you keep stacking those on top of one another, join those two little wings that stick out the bottom, one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, then you get a quartz crystal. Now, because of the way that vibrates, that specific shape, they are very, very good at vibrating. Arguably, a really clear quartz crystal isn't really a solid because it vibrates so much that, arguably it's a different state. But, obviously it is solid. I digress. The fact is that all a crystal does is stack up a polymer of the same atomic structure, one on top of the next, on top of the next, on top of the next, on top of the next. Now, if you're talking about all the atoms in here made choices to come together to make this molecule, right, then this molecule is going to vibrate in a very specific way because of the interactions, like I said, that hybridized field between the entire structure. Now, if you then add one more, and one more, and one more, they're the same structure. They're going to vibrate in the same way. There's going to be sympathetic resonance between each of those little molecules. So when you strike the bottom of a quartz crystal, it will vibrate. It will pass that resonant vibration you put in all the way from where you hit it through the whole crystal. So the whole crystal will vibrate with a specific frequency made by the interaction with it. Now, like I said, passing vibration into the ethers is really what consciousness is from a pantheistic point of view. So when you strike that crystal and it puts out that vibration, is showing you it's alive. And then when you get into sympathetic resonance, this is something that I'm going to have to keep going back to as well. The idea that when you get two like structures, like a quartz crystal, if you strike it, it will start to ring at whatever frequency. If you then bring over another quartz crystal next to it, the interaction between the vibrations of this crystal and that one will make both of them vibrate at the same frequency. Right now, that there is very, very important moving forwards, because the vibration, not just being passed out into the ether, but interacting with other like structures is incredibly important for how consciousness actually propagates. And it starts at this level here. So the next thing I'm going to show you is something of how molecules on their own, just molecules, can become life. And not only that, but how like simple things can show consciousness at that atomic level, at that molecular level. First of this here is that was the quartz crystal. Another thing I was going to say about the actual properties of crystals. So remember what I said about atoms have certain qualities based on the amount of electrons. Well, crystals have certain properties based on the elements involved and the structure, because the structure is very important. That's what gives it its vibration. And then when you start looking at what people talk about these crystals are for, so the example on the left here is sodalite. Now, sodalite is described as being able to absorb lots of energy, being able to hold on to things inside its crystal lattice. Now, it just blows my mind that at the atomic level, it's made of tiny little spheres. It's basically like an atomic level sponge. So if anything was going to be able to do what they metaphysically say that it can do, that's it at the atomic level. I don't know. It blows my mind. The one on the right here is actually lapis lazuli. Right now, I could only show it from this angle because it gets unbelievably complex as it goes down the polymer. It's kind of like a 4-stage repeated structure. But because of the way I think you can see from the mandala, the kind of the dual aspect of the tunnel structure that it creates, that once again, you can understand why putting energy in at one end would cause such an intense reaction to come out of the other. And we might see that as just the crystal vibrating. But like I said, that vibration is what life is. That's the same thing that you're doing right now to be conscious, to be alive. So just because human beings don't understand what consciousness is, doesn't mean that you can discount other examples of it, because it doesn't match our version of. So the facets in a crystal, the complex structures that they make, the atoms involved, all of these things go to make the anatomy of a crystal, as it were. And the input being vibration, and the output being that vibration being honed and tuned and changed by the structure itself and the vibration. So the next example I want to give you is the work of somebody called Veda Austin. Now, what she does is she continued the work of Osamu. I can never remember his name. The Japanese guy that did that froze the snowflakes. So what she does, what Veda Austin does, is she takes images and she puts a petri dish full of water over the image for quite a short period of time, and then she freezes the petri dish. Now, what her work shows is that water itself has a memory that if you show it a picture, it will hold on to the vibration of that picture inside its structure for an extended period of time. So when you freeze it, it will actually make pictures that are stored inside it. So you've got these are examples mostly of the pictures, but where you've got the guy on the ladder there, it's got the ladder and you've got the swirling pattern, the woman, the 4-letter. But when it gets to the crystals is really where it starts to blow my mind. If you look at that bottom corner with the pyramid, I mean, that shows you the actual molecular effect of the pyramid effect in the water. And that's after once she puts it on, she takes the picture away. So all of this is just stored in the memory in the water. And if you look into her work, she does even more incredible stuff, like where she will ask the water questions, or where she will speak to it and say, or give it an emotion like love or whatever else. And it will answer the questions in an image. It will actually, if you write love and you put it on the bit of paper and put it underneath it, then you put it into the freezer, it won't say love. It will show you a picture of a heart, because water is conscious. And it holding these images and it portraying these things in this way is it communicating. So this is where we start to see panpsychism and how it can scale up very, very quickly. So what this guy does is he basically makes something called protocells.
So then we put these protocells together in a single experiment to see what they would do. And depending on the conditions, we have some protocells on the left there that are moving around, and then it likes to touch the other structures in its environment. On the other hand, we have two moving protocells that like to circle each other, and they form kind of a complex dance with each other, right?
So the thing about protocells that I want to kind of get through is those things that you saw then, they acted like they're alive. They were moving around, they were performing tasks, they were doing things, but they're not alive. All you saw there was drips of oil with some water, with some food coloring in so you could see them, and a few sets of proteins. So they didn't have any DNA. They have none of the working parts that we think of as you needing to have life. They literally just have a couple of proteins that do metabolism, a couple of proteins that give them the ability to move or sense their food. And then they're put into that little bubble and they allowed to get going. And you just saw, they act like they're alive. Let's get into the second density. Once you get into these huge multicellular forms that go on to make us, you end up getting to all these different complexities. Now, like I said before, a polymer, which is just a repeated layered structure of atoms, same as in a crystal. Yeah, and they amplify the system. So where you have those few atoms vibrating in a very specific way, if you get the same again, then that vibration gets doubled, like Ra said, like the law of squaring. The more of those structures interact, the bigger the field, the energy put out. So when you start getting into what we don't think of as alive, like, do you think of plants as alive? Do you think that animals are as conscious as us? Insects? Do you? Because every single step of what I've just showed you from those little dots bouncing around on a thing, to to water being able to actually answer questions, and that atoms and crystals themselves are the purest form of awareness, just completely straight vibrational. So when you start getting into these incredibly complex structures like a cell or like an animal, the actual steps of awareness dramatically increase every single step. Like Russ says, the whole point of the second density is just to try to understand like what you are, to understand personality and individuality. So that's the whole point of all of the steps of the plant and the animal kingdom. And they are just slowly more and more and more complex steps in awareness until you get to the third density ones where, we can actually retrospectively understand what that awareness means. So I'd like to show you a couple of examples that I think are really, really quite incredible, that shows awareness happening. Actually, no. Okay, so I don't think actually I've got the examples, but I'd like to talk about someone called Becker, right? So, Baxter. Sorry. So he basically did work with plants where he would set up a lie detector on different areas of the plant, and then he could literally measure the electrical flow that goes up and down the plant. And he found that they have very, very specific and regulated flows, and different plants have very, very specific wavelengths and ways of making that energy move around that will be the same in that type of plant. Because once again, it's all the structure giving the vibration that allows the plant to then resonate and vibrate, which is essentially passing information. So so by measuring that plant moving, the energy moving up and down the plant, you can get a good gauge of its consciousness. I'm going to show you in a minute a device called a plant wave that lots of people use to connect to plants, and that converts it into sound, so that those wavelengths going up and down the plant actually kind of can be turned into music. But before I get that, I want to talk about these bats, because he said basically that he had this plant connected to the lie detector, and he found that if he thought about doing certain things, giving it water, stroking its leaves, then the waveform on the lie detector would change. You'd get different vibrations depending on what he was thinking, and not what he did, what he was thinking. So the plant had some way of connecting to his consciousness specifically, because if he thought about burning that plant, within a fraction of a second, like the instant that he thought about burning the plant, the lie detector would go mad. It'd be all over the place. So how does that work? Because he then tested this, and he did this from 2 states away. And the instant that he thought it, the plant back at his house went mad. How does this work? Because plants understand the quantum aspect of consciousness. They, once again, are far closer to this one original thought, to this vibrational understanding. So when they understand consciousness, they see it from a wavelength, from a vibrational point of view. I wanted to put up the Russian plant experiments, but I'm always a little bit kind of dubious. I don't know how real they are, but I'd highly recommend finding it on YouTube. It's incredible. They line up these plants, and they have one person come in and they'll water it. One person will come in and they'll talk nicely to it and wave, stroke the plant's leaf. Then another person will come in and they'll grab one of the plants and they'll just chop it up into loads of bits, brutally destroy it. Now, the other plant that's connected to the ECG lie detector thing, as soon as the woman starts cutting it up, the plant goes mad. All over the place. Now, it's that clearly shows that it knows that this thing has happened to its friend. That's all messed up. But then they had a thing where they had the plant that's witnessed the murder, as it were, and they had 3 other plants, all lined up to their EEG things. Then they had the first woman come in, watered it, no change. The next woman that come in and stroked the plants, no change. As soon as the murderer walked in the room, the plant that witnessed the murder went mad, boop, 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 and then all 3 of the other plants went mad. How? That means that not only did it recognize the murderer, but it was able to communicate that information to its friends purely through the vibration that goes up and down its body. Yeah, a lot of people say that insects and things can kind of hear the sounds the plants make. So when they approach a flower, the flower hears their buzz, they hear the kind of sing of it, and they know how much food's in it. This idea that vibration and sound and consciousness inside the animal, plant, and insect kingdoms is amazing. When you start looking at kind of some of the ways that they're finding that animals communicate, that is incredible. That's incredible too. Yeah. So this is literally just 2 electrodes plant between those 2 leaves. And then it changes the electrical vibration for a synth, for a musical instrument. So really what you're hearing here is the neurons of the plant firing, of the chemicals, of what the energy moving around inside the plant. Once again, once you get that movement, that is essentially what consciousness is, according to our kind of way of understanding. This completes us kind of up to where we are, right, on the path of awareness and of evolution of consciousness. So far we've kind of seen that everything is one mind. We've kind of chatted about that. That's why I really like this picture that my lovely girlfriend made. It's that inside the pupil there is the map of the known universe that we can see. Scaled down to make it look like a pupil. I love that. I thought it was cool. So the idea that everything is just the creator. Everything is just awareness. And that this pantheism, as in God in everything, is everywhere. It's universal. And then the idea that everything is consciousness scales all the way up and all the way down. So this is the best way I've found of understanding unity, of understanding oneness. That there's no separation, there's no difference between any of us. The red ray body is the exact same red ray atomics, like perception, understanding in the entire universe. Every single thing, every single atom has that same awareness. Every piece of water is linked in some vibrational way, sympathetic resonance. So all of these things, every single vibration, every single part of it is then passed into the Akashic, stored as a crystal, and the future keeps progressing. This comes to us. Why are we different? What's so mad about the 3rd density? So this brings us to something that has been argued about in psychology and science for hundreds of years, arguably forever. It's the basis of what philosophy really is. Yeah, this is what's called the hard problem of consciousness. And that is that when you think about it, you are a body. Yeah. But what is a body? A body is just atoms. It's just atoms flapping about, moving together, about. Like, there's no organizing factor. There's no animus. But if you just look at it from the body. Right. And then, start thinking, okay, no, I am the mind. Yeah. I am the brain. The brain makes me. Consciousness comes from the brain. But unfortunately, it kind of doesn't. And when you start looking into the research, it's quite clear the brain doesn't make consciousness. That's not how it works. So then you get this idea of, so your body is your body. That's the awareness. That's all the instruments that you have to take in information. And the brain kind of creates the ego. And the ego is this individualized you. But when you hear your own thoughts in your head, that's the ego talking. Who's the one that listens to those thoughts? And that is the idea of the observer, the watcher. And that's one of the points of meditation, that you get yourself to that place where you observe your thoughts, where you disassociate from them because you know that they're not you. Right? And that right there is kind of one of the key things that we all need to be understanding. And once again, Ra gives this complete, beautiful way of understanding those three in the mind-body-spirit complex. That the body is the atoms, is the moving about. Yeah, the mind is the thing that allows them to move in a certain way and collects all the data and gives it I am a thing. But the thing that witnesses is still creator. It's always creator. And that's the same creator for all of us. And that's the same creator that the atoms and every single thing, every word that you've ever said in your head, creator listened. That is the spirit part. And there's no separation. The separation is an illusion created by that ego that is held inside that body, so that the spirit, the thing that listens, the thing that hears, the thing that actually sees, so that can experience reality. Now I want to kind of give you a little bit of a brief lesson about neuroscience. Very, very quick. Don't want to melt anyone's brain. But on the left, you see basically a picture of a neuron as we know it. Now, the bit in the center is called the cell body. That's where it's got the nucleus and all the organelles keeping it running and doing stuff. But then you have all these little strands that come off the side. Now, those are called dendrites. Now, if you look on the next picture along, dendrites connect up to one another. Those dendrites from two different neurons. They connect up to one another and they send back information. The information is neurotransmitters, but arguably you could see it as ones and zeros. So every single time one of those little tiny sticks coming out the side of that neuron touches the other one, so the green one touching the blue one or the blue one touching the green one, every single time they touch, they interact and they send messages backwards and forwards to one another inside of what's called a synapse. Now, those synapses essentially give you a plus or a minus signal. And then once all those plus and minus signals are added up, then you get a threshold, which gives you an action potential that sends, like you can see over here, the red one in the background, it sends a huge energetic stream down that one long one, and that will send a message off to dendrites of another neuron. Now, the reason that your brain is able to do that is because of the complexity. Now, the picture on the right is a picture of one singular neuron and all of the different dendritic connections connected to that one cell body. If you just look at the scale of the information processing, every single neuron is a computer. But weirdly, that there on times a trillion, because you have like a trillion of them, is not enough information to process being conscious. Weirdly, like it's a lot, but it's not enough. And this is where we've gone wrong, because all of the theories of consciousness that we've had, and arguably there's a lot, I think there's 200 and something theories on consciousness at the minute, that none of them have been proved right. None of them are complete. None of them give you the whole picture. So all the classical theories that we have, all of them relied on what I just showed you. That model of ones and zeros being passed between two separate like between the neurons, to then give you the information transfer that we're talking about. But as they've learned more, every single model has kind of fallen away. As they've understood the levels of complexity that would be needed and the levels of complexity that we have, there has to be other systems in play. There has to be other ways, because you only have very small areas of the brain activated to do specific jobs. Everything's grouped together in very specific ways that doesn't allow for the kind of incredible things that the human brain can do. So we've got all these different models, but to me, all of the kind of things like ITT and GWT, these integration models of how stacking up all of those neurons, working together in a certain way, this way, that, can then consciousness can then emerge from it. That isn't, in my opinion, how it can work. And science has showed over and over again that it doesn't work that way. One of the ways that this has been shown is this idea that when you think something, they were trying to work out the kind of process of how you think this one thing goes to the next. And they found out that the parts of the brain that do like the processing, that do the thinking, as it were, they do the thinking, and then they transfer that information to either the auditory or the visual center for you to understand. So you don't think, you don't do the processing. Something kind of essentially beams it in to a certain area that then they will flash, take in the information, and then your brain tells it to you afterwards. And that's the process. The thoughts come in, they processed, and then your brain explains it to you. So the current theory of how the brain really works is that it's a filter, that it takes in all this information from many, many ways. And, you know, I'm going to say outright that the infinite creator is channeled through everything. So our consciousness, everything, we are just experiencing the creator. All of our thoughts, they are all just creator. So, you know, realistically, we are like a prism. We are like a filter where that energy, that light, that consciousness, that infinite knowing comes into a thing that cuts down what it knows, that minimizes what it can perceive and brings it down to the level of awareness that it needs to be at to learn those specific lessons that it needs to learn. The individualized process, the path that we all take. So these kind of the way that you're, like, you know, when you actually look at it, kind of each one of the densities, especially when you look at it, how they mean in a humanistic sense, you know, survival or inspiration, or all of those things are just kind of different kind of filtered perceptions of infinite intelligence. And, you know, there's lots of kind of science that backs this up. Like I said, we don't think about things that kind of beamed in, and then our brain explains it to us. You know, arguably that's how channeling works, and arguably that's why every single one of us only ever channel creator. This is really going to blow your mind, because it did me. The current theories on how memory works are kind of weird, because we've got no real idea how memory works. We don't know kind of how you recall things, how you can vividly see something from the past that happened. We don't understand. So the current theory on this is that actually the memories, the neural patterns that light up when you remember something, act more like a map, where essentially they contain coordinates that move your consciousness in a very specific way to a specific point in time-space. And then from that point, you then recollect via awareness. And that is essentially what memory is. That is what remembering is. It is a case of you actually focusing your consciousness back to a certain point. Now, this can become very, very fragile when you start looking at kind of how the human brain can kind of mess with the signal, how it can add things and change things and whatever else. So there's lots of kind of complexity to how that works, the reconciliation method, but reconciliation method. But it's fundamentally that idea that your brain works more like a quantum map that gives certain specific points in space-time via neural connections and the actual kind of the processes that I'm going to hopefully get into in a second with the actual quantum consciousness part. But yeah, this really kind of blew my mind when you start talking about Ra's idea of time, space, space, time, and the idea that we are this bridge, we are this central point. That's what kind of third density is arguably for. Is learning to understand this interdimensional thing by time being our first kind of big picture. But obviously it will just get more and more complex as the densities go up. When a cube becomes a tesseract, it's a big change. This whole process that that memory is time travel, and that, the future potentials of imagination is, and the idea that you can remember the future or that you can guide the future with thought. All of those things come back to that same thing I was talking about in the last module with the quantum handshake, where light from a sun will come flying down over 10 billion years, whatever. But depending on whether you're looking at the slits on the single slit, the double slit experiment, depending on whether you're looking at it or not, that photon that came from that sun will be a wave or a particle. And it would have always been a wave or a particle since coming out of that sun 10 billion years ago, because time doesn't exist to a photon. So your understanding and awareness, your ability to challenge that dimensional understanding of time and time, space, space, time, is the thing that creates that quantum handshake, allows you to kind of transcend that dimensional space. And it's more just evidence that, time, space is all just an illusion of consciousness, and that every single thing is linked, even you and every star in the universe, what that you look at. The actual kind of models that link all these things is the quantum consciousness idea. So this idea talks about the fact that, like we've been saying, that consciousness is fundamental to everything. And that really matter and the mind and all of these different things are just ways of the universe, the creator, experiencing and exploring itself. So the idea being that everything exists in a quantum state of probability until awareness, until things get resolved into reality. So the idea of this in neuroscience terms is something that they call orchestrated or orchestrated reality. Now, the idea being that when you view something, when you see it, when you interact with it, when you think it, your viewing of it collapses that waveform from every possibility that it could be into a thing. So the idea with the orchestrated reality idea is that every single thing that you come in contact with is vibration, and your awareness of it is how those vibrations interact, how they come together or they move apart to either collapse the waveform into something real or just dissipate or cancel each other out. And everything can come down to that. The way that we perceive and the way we interact with the universe can purely come down to that same vibrational understanding that I spoke about last time. The Penrose and Hameroff model is the far most complete. And like I said, I think it matches perfectly to the things that Ra says. The way that this works is that inside your neurons, as I showed you earlier, there is these specific structures called microtubules. I'll get to describing them a bit more later on. But the idea is that they can take on very specific chemical modifications, and they're linked via little bridges to basically every single part of the cell. They monitor, they connect, they things travel around on them. You must have seen those videos of the little dinosaur motors pulling huge balls of neurotransmitters. These are the pathways that they pull them down. They control the movement of water and other elements around inside the cell. But they also vibrate very, very specific ways. So as you can see here, this kind of like how the neurons essentially send messages down. Now these are the microtubules here, but the vibration of this energy going down is then put out from that microtubule, out to the next neuron next to it, and the next neuron next to it, and the next neuron next to it. And the interactions of those waves interacting with one another is the core of how we have awareness. That the interactions between those in this unbelievably complex supercomputer you call a brain, the interactions at that quantum vibrational level is what we perceive. And the chemistry and the electrochemistry and all the other parts of biology that we know are essentially just to house this quantum system. These are microtubules. These are the things that I spoke about earlier. So these basically go through the entire cell. I'll show you them in a minute. And these are the main components that were used to kind of show this system. Now, what Hameroff did was he investigated how anesthetics work. Now, anesthetics, they just knock you out, right? But how? How do they knock you out? And there's there's a big range of being knocked out. Some anesthetics will knock you out a bit. Some of them will knock you out, and you still have a little bit of, a little bit here going on. Wait a sec, I remember feeling that. So how does it make you unconscious? How do you stop consciousness? So they tested lots and lots of anesthetics, and they found the only ones that completely block consciousness and make pretty much everything, including plants, unconscious, are the drugs that affect microtubules. If you stop the vibration up and down those microtubules, doesn't matter what part of life you are, you're unconscious. Straight up. Every single thing. So the way that this works is that the theory is that because of the way the structure of these tubes, the inside and the outside have got a very different kind of vibration. One end has a different vibration to the other. So you end up with this oscillation, this vibration moving along that quantum hybridized field from one end of the structure to the other, backwards and forwards at a very specific rate, depending on its length and what energies are put into it. Added to that, on the inside, it can make very specific modifications that can then make changes to that field going out. So then once again, just in each one of these tiny things, you've got an incredibly precise, incredibly controllable unit of processing of information moving around. That is arguably the most fundamental thing to how consciousness spreads out the brain. So another interesting theory about this is related to things that they've found in carbon nanotubes. Now, these are a bit bigger than carbon nanotubes, but the theory is the same. That inside a tube like this, inside a closed dipole system, you actually create like a wormhole, like a way of things on the inside speeding up to a quantum state, like faster than light, essentially, inside that little space. So if we're talking about, like I said, the time travel aspect, or in a later talk, I'm going to be talking about biophotons. The idea that these things can be moved around the body at quantum faster than light rates, and that consciousness seems to be working at that kind of speed. These are the best candidates for it. I'm also going to get into the anatomy and the structure of the pineal gland in the next lecture, because that's incredibly important for showing how our body builds up and uses these vibrations to create reality as we know it. So here you can see the bottom picture there shows you how widespread these things are. It doesn't really even do it justice. They are everywhere. They're in the entire structure of how the cell organizes itself. Now, they're very, very simple. They're made of two monomers. These is the heteromer there, the tubulin, which is just two different A and B proteins that stick together in a one then the next, a repetitive order. And them working together is what creates these incredibly precise, unbelievably well-defined dipole tubes, with the energy on the inside being different from the outside. And like I said, and a flowing molecular system at the kind of atomic scale. So in the other corner up here, the right corner, you'll see there that on the inside, you can have all these different modifications, all these different chemicals that can be added that then change the vibratory rate or the actual vibration that's coming out from these things when they interact with one another. The actual whole nervous system, the whole nervous system as it is just an antenna. Yeah, it links into or puts out these vibrational energies that you perceive, that you go through, that you interact with, into the substrate, as it were, that allows the universe or the creator to experience itself. Now, this is basically this part here is where I'm going to be going much deeper in with the next lectures. So I'm going to kind of leave that bit there. But the idea being that your body is a receiver, your mind is a filter, and the thing that is beamed in to you is the spirit, is the thing that is consciousness, that is understanding it all. And all the body does and the mind do is they allow it to experience. Now, one of the things that's important here that I think needs to be brought up is this idea of raising our vibration. Now, by doing that, by doing the right things, by doing things that energize the body in the right way, that move the energies around the way that it's supposed to, you then create this system where you are a better antenna, where you can take in more, where things can oscillate and vibrate in a way that allows you to increase that awareness part. And like I said, the crystallization of consciousness all comes down to how our awareness of the world around us can work with catalysts to teach the creator. Now, another thing we have to look at here is the kind of how the grosser structure of this works. So we've got how neurons and microtubules can interact with one another to give this vibrational supercomputer, but there's many different states of consciousness that humans can experience. Like meditation, astral projection, different psychedelic states can give you the most unbelievably profound spiritual and awareness and experience. But like Ra says, all you do when you have any of these practices is you open up that awareness. You expand that awareness. You raise your vibration to a point where you can take in and that expanded part of the universe, where you can see more of the infinite intelligence. And that essentially is the whole point, right? That's what we're here to do. Now, here is just an example of, what people say about right or left brain thinking. This here is a functional MRI of somebody doing a deep meditation state, where they're kind of pulling in the, infinite intelligence. And you can clearly see the very specific areas of the brain are active while other areas are shut down. And the areas that work to do with inspiration or memory that I did have, because this was another thing I was going to go with here, but I think I'm going to put that in the next one. The different areas of the brain that are directly connected to psychedelic experiences and to astral projection and other states. Because quite a lot of research has gone onto it. So, but I'm going to leave that for the next one. And I'm just going to say that this one here shows that there's very, very specific areas that need to work together in a way vibrationally to give you these states, to give you these higher points of awareness. Reconfirming that whole idea that the vibration itself at every single level is then passed into the ether, passed into the Akashic, which is stored. It's the crystallization. That's why our choices matter. Because when we make a choice, that's it. We are setting the universe from the infinite probability, possibility matrix into something that has happened. A specific time point in time space. And arguably, that is the point of consciousness. That's the point of all of us, to do that, to accrue awareness, to make choices, to see the creator in all things. What Ra says about how to kind of crystallize our consciousness. Now, he really does kind of lay it in very simple ways. We have to know ourselves, know other selves, see the creator, be the creator. And that can be applied at so many different levels, right? The discipline of personality that he talks about is just this idea of harmonizing yourself with those vibrations, of making your choices in line and align with a specific resonance, with a specific polarity. Now, like the other works, like I said, the Austin Vedder work with the water crystallizing in a certain way for giving it information. We do that same thing. We take in these vibrations and we turn that into the thoughts and the vibrations that make us and make reality. And this two-way process, this panpsychism, pantheism, meeting at that midpoint, being us, allow us to then essentially make steps and make choices to crystallize ourselves. Remember what a crystal is? A crystal is just that same repeated pattern. Now, if you know the pattern that you want to be, then you are structuring yourself to become that crystal. And then it's stable. And each little spiritual seeking, each step that we take, each time we understand, we see the creator in all things. Every time we see, the another self mirroring, us mirrored in another self. Whenever we see all of these things, we are taking those little steps to crystallizing our consciousness into a way that's arguably we're all going to need to, because that's how a social memory complex works. That all of us open our heart chakra, we take that step and we connect. Because we know, and that's what the shadow works for, is to get rid of all the dark stuff so you don't mind doing it. To make those choices of coherence, of connection, of oneness. How do we know that we're doing it? How do we do this work? Well, that's the whole point of incarnation, right? That's the point of other selves. Yeah, the relationships we have in this in this reality here are very important, because they give us the opportunity to know ourselves. They give us the opportunity to know other selves. They give us the opportunity to make these steps and learn these lessons, to crystallize, to take the steps up, to expand our understanding, expand our consciousness and awareness every single step until, we're firmly in that fourth density, and it's a very different place to be. I'd just like to say that, all of this, I hope that you've got, is all just more showing us every step of the way that the universe is just thought. We are just dreams dancing in the ballroom of a dream. And every single part of the universe, all the way up and all the way down, is the same. The only person that has full awareness is the creator. And we are filtered to this point of awareness, but we are. And awareness is and consciousness itself are fractal and the same at all levels, scale invariant. So the point is to keep learning. Everybody keep trying to crystallize. Everyone keeps trying to raise that vibration and realize that everything that you are is built to help you do that. And all consciousness is a tool of all the ego is, or the you is a tool to experience and to crystallize and to make those choices, to crystallize the universe in a very specific way, a harmonious way. And as adepts are trying to move forwards, trying to bring all these things into a usable system, that is one of the most important things that any of us can learn. And that's, see the creator in all things. See see all other selves as yourself. Have compassion and love for the catalysts and for the world itself, for everything, because it's all you. I hope that you've seen that at all levels. This consciousness is just a progression from one proton to all the other protons, to all the other chemicals, to all of the other the cells and the multi-cells and the planets and the systems, the galaxies, the suns. They're all just steps in awareness, steps in consciousness. So we should really learn how to use ours, because with all the things that I've said here, these are the baseline understanding of what you are. Know yourself, right? So once we know what we are, we know how these things work, this is where we can scale it up. This is where we can actually start thinking about how to do adept work in a real energetic, scientific sense.
Thank you, Ed, for sharing these explanations and teachings. You have offered another way to look at creation and consciousness, just to simply show us how consciousness explores and experiences itself in an easy way to comprehend or to remember how this might work. Thanks as well to everyone taking part of these editions, for the one who are in the background, for the one who are seeing this. calls and attending them. And also for the ones who maybe are reading this in another occasion, listening, or even in any other way. We look forward to meeting again and continue to learn from this project, the Ra University, together. And of course, being again in the company of Ed, who does this and putting his effort and time there for us, the listeners, the viewers, the observers, and the ones who experience reality in another way.
Thank you so much for listening. Love and light to you all.